We are in a state of the world where it becomes very necessary to become aware of the real dangers of strong polarization. And that can be only seen when one is not into the political game, one is not into the power game, one is not into any involvement directly. That is why when I speak about it, I am not a political person, I am not a person who has any ambitions for power or prestige. But in such a situation, it will be valuable when the clarity is coming in and can indicate in which direction what goes. For example, those who are in an unclear state, those who are trapped in the desire for power, caught in the intoxication of wanting to hold to their position, and has vested interest, because if they are not able to go further in that direction, they come into difficulty. So once people go into a misunderstanding and go in the wrong direction, there is the tendency to defend, blindly fight, and use any means at any cost without considering what are the real consequences of it for the society, for the world, for humanity at large, for life at large on our planet. Previously, when there were political struggles, it was a different issue because there was not so much power, especially not so much destructive power. There are not so many ways to influence and manipulate the others. So it was more a primitive violence which was happening. But in our present situation, with all the capacities of destructive weapons in such big amounts, with strong capacities, with the possibility to manipulate and depict things in a false way through the misuse of artificial intelligence, through creating fake stories and collecting people who are simple and innocent to believe that this is so. So their goodness, their trust is often misused by those who are inwardly unclear. But I want to say beforehand one thing. The bad is not absolute. The evil is not absolute. What is absolute is the goodness, is the divinity of everyone. That is why those who are getting into evil, those who are getting into falsehood, those who are getting into misunderstanding and destructive processes, just to punish them in a revengeful way, out of anger, out of fear, does not really answer the situation in a healthy way. Because what the real problem is the misunderstanding in which these people have got into. So, on one side, it is valuable to contain that their destructive process is not going further. But on the other side, to answer to the challenge without anger, without hate, without revengefulness is very, very necessary. This is the background. That is why it becomes very important that these factors get understood rightly. So it is not good against bad. It is more like understanding to be confronted with misunderstanding. Light to be brought where there is darkness. What is now, for example, in various political developments in the world is that those who are seeking power and are ready to use every means to hold to power, to use every form of corruption, every form of vested interest to settle in their positions. They are not seeing what consequences it has. So in this context, for example, now I have been coming across some of the news coverage from the American election. There is the existing president. People complain he's old. There are people in both the parties say there's so much age situation where it is unpredictable how long this person can remain a president. Yes, that is one aspect of it. But what I infer, my impression of this president is that he sees the situation more deeply than many others. And in spite of his age, in spite of the challenges he is facing, he is ready to stand for that what he feels is good and valuable. Of course, he has to see that he doesn't fall into the trap of anger and hatred and revengefulness. But with his orientation to something deeper, he sees that when his opponent is coming into power, it will be a very disastrous development, not only for the local American politics, because a system of democracy which is giving a hope for the world can be misused. And when these people who come into power through the democratic means misuse the power to corrupt those who are taking care of the different functions, to appoint people who will just follow their personal interests, whose vision is not deep enough to contain the whole humanity and the whole reality, but only limited to a narrow perception. This is dangerous, because once they start regaining power and control the different official structures, appoint people in all this according to their kind of personal and political interests. When they appoint people in the judiciary who are no more orienting to the constitutional rights and the human rights and the deeper dignity of humanity, but more into vested interests of the parties and the politics, then it is a blind dictatorship. And the blind dictatorship in the context of the world now, where there is so much possibility to misuse power, so much destructive potential, is very dangerous because there are more other challenging difficulties with the climate, with the ecological destructive processes, with the extremes of war, creating more suffering for so many innocent and helpless human beings. So all this can be addressed only by those who are in touch with their heart, who are in touch with something deeper, who are not just behind power and politics, who are not having vested interest. That is why it becomes necessary to speak about it, it becomes necessary to bring the attention to these aspects. And one has to understand how nature works. For example, in the world of finances, often you come across false currency. But have you considered it that the false currency can exist and function to some extent only when there is the basis of the real currency? When the real currency has no basis, the false currency will have also no basis. So it will be very destructive in that level also when you see that when there is no basic human values being understood and respected and lived, then everything starts collapsing. That is the danger. That is why everybody who understands and sees has a certain kind of responsibility to respond from a state of clarity, from a state without hatred and revenge, without provoking violence, without provoking destructive processes, to bring the attention, to see that we have this very beautiful planet. We are in this planet which is, when you look from a distance, is paradise. But when we human beings don't understand our path and don't take the responsibility which is needed to be taken, we can also destroy everything. We can destroy not only other aspects of nature, we can destroy the whole life process, we can destroy all humanity. And we have sufficient weapons all over. And if you look, more and more wealth is put in for the production of weapons. The budget for the military purposes are all over the world rising. And this can change only when there is a different and deep understanding where people realize that we have to coexist. We have to try to understand each other. We have to bring a different way of insight and communication with each other, so that we can understand the significance of the diversity, so that we can understand the dignity of all human beings and all life, and live with that sensibility. But it's not easy, because when we don't consider all this more on individual levels, it's all just only in the head. So the individuals who take it into their lives and consider it and bring their understanding into living, they are the ones who create the spine for a new quality of humanity. And it is very much urgent now, more than ever. So we have to understand that as human beings, we have a great responsibility and we have a great chance, because this is the first time where the consciousness can deepen so easily, because consciousness means we are able to see the interconnectedness of all factors in life, that we are able to look at things. But to be able to see that, we have to look into ourselves. Because we have in us the tendency of survival where we attempt unconsciously and automatically to avoid confrontation with the reality, to distract ourselves, to make ourselves busy with things so that we don't need to face the real problems, real challenges, because we don't know what the answers are. That is why only when people go more deeply into themselves, they will start not only understanding themselves and each other more deeply, they will come to the realization we are part of a wonder. We are part of a mysterious reality where there is unfathomable intelligence and a deep care. So, that what is called the source, that what is referred to as the creative basis, or what in different ways is indicated as the divine, as the great spirit, or other expressions. We need to understand it individually. We need to experientially understand it. We need to recognize the significance of it, because that is what will give us the right inner strength. It is not a strength to destroy anybody, but it's a strength to continue to orient to that what is good, that what is intelligent, that what is loving. And that is what is possible, that is what is needed. And this is the time where only such an orientation, through the individuals who understand and bring it into living, can create the backbone, the spine, the basis. So I just wanted to bring attention to this aspect, and it will be valuable when more and more people consider it in their own way and respond.